Welcome to another special edition of Wealth Coherence, where we are focusing on purposeful prenups. So tell me about, you wrote an article recently about another football player, Matthew
Right.
Stafford. I'd like to hear about
Yeah.
what your thoughts were about him and the fact that he did have a prenup.
Well, what happened was that Kelly Stafford was on her podcast and was quoted a lot in the press about saying that he was very generous in her prenup. And she first didn't really feel like she wanted one, and then she felt it was a good thing. So I have a Google alert set for Generous Prenup because that's the name of my book. So I kept on looking at that, and I started to wonder what their prenup might have been. And he did have quite a bit of money at the time. They were college sweethearts, and then they kind of dated other people for a while, but they pretty much stayed married. And I think they got married about 10 years ago. They're now in their late 30s, so they got married in their late 20s. And by that time, he had already amassed, I think, 50 million or something like that. And now he has something like 150 million. So she didn't reveal what was in their prenup. But, they got married when he already had a lot of premarital property. So I do think that it was an appropriate prenup when that happens. But it has to be the right prenup.
Yeah.
And lots of times there's kind of a new way to do it, to say that when there's premarital property, the old way to do it is to say all the earnings on premarital property, like if they're invested stock market earnings and all that, will also be separate. But a new way to do it is to take the snapshot approach and say, okay, your premarital property is yours, but any growth in that and anything you earn after that is marital property. And that's kind of a nice sharing way to do it, especially when the people are relatively young and still working. And the money that he would have in that snapshot would secure him in case they get a divorce, and because he might have a short lifespan to his career. The outlier is Tom Brady, who played until he was about 44. And I think that Matthew Stafford is about 37. But Tom Brady is now a Fox News broadcaster, and he earns millions of dollars a year. So somebody at Matthew Stafford's, with his visibility in his career, he probably will be a broadcaster or something like that. Maybe an actor, who knows, and will make significant money. So the snapshot method is a really nice way to create marital property, or community property, as they call it in California, to make the marriage thrive, to feel like, because when somebody's working, that's why in all states the money you earn working is marital property, or community property in California.
Yeah. So if your assets are working for you, that's like another way to think about it. It's like it's income that's being earned during the marriage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but lots of prenups say that the assets, or the earnings on assets, are separate property.
But
Most prenups say that.
yeah.
And I think that in many instances, the snapshot way is better, even though, because of inflation, the snapshot value decreases, the real purchasing value decreases. But
Yeah.
then the marital money, or the community property, gets divided 50-50. So there's more property to secure somebody like Matthew Stafford, who might not be able to work. Um,
How would you do a snapshot situation when, let's say, you're a beneficiary of a trust that's with multiple beneficiaries, and it's like the family money? So it's not just like you have one trust, your
right.
name, and it's,
Usually they're separate shares. If there's multiple beneficiaries, then you don't have a certain,
yeah.
a certain amount. But that raises the beneficiary of trust question. Usually these trusts are set up with independent trustees that have the total discretion as to whether to give
Yeah.
money or not, right? And that's the way the dynasty trusts, and also trusts that aren't going from generation to generation. So you have to kind of keep on good terms with the family office and the trustee. And the question is, and also that the trust really is insulated against claims from ex-spouses. But, that's one of the purposes of it, to make sure it's insulated. And they really usually are. But if you don't share the money that actually comes out, that can really create, and if the spouse feels insecure and left out and abused, then that can hurt the marriage. So you don't want to have a money sharing lacking, so that it predicts and creates a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
So in mediation, we talk about what happens when the money comes out, what happens when the money is on your tax return, what happens when the money is principal versus income, like dividends or business income. What happens about businesses if you're active in it?
Yeah.
And then sometimes some of sometimes we do plans that are nixed by the family office, but
Mhm.
at least the discussion is there.
That's the key, is having
Yeah.
those conversations and really getting those expectations on the table. And then hopefully if the family office nixes it, they don't treat it like that's an adversary, but more like we have these standards that we're using, and they educate and they explain why
Mhm.
those options don't necessarily work within the bigger scope and
Yeah.
plan for the family wealth. But then I would also hope that there would be some sort of negotiation, which would be, since we can't do this, this is
Yeah.
another way we can possibly honor you and what you want to accomplish with your marriage, right? So
And
it's a
even if
both
it's
and.
not in the prenup, it can be
Mhm.
it's a training for an idea about what happens when you don't share money that's coming in.
Exactly.
That it's a good thing to share if you're
Yeah.
married. Sharing money is a really big part of most marriages.
Huge. There was one question I had for you, because you shared with me offline, and it has to do with this idea of these websites that are popping up now. Like, we can do your prenup for you at this really low rate. And I wanted to hear your thoughts about that, because
Yeah,
you have some opinions about that
I
too.
do. I started in this podcast. I started talking about how when two people start to talk about prenups just with each other, first of all, they lack information.
Mhm.
They're told that state law will dictate their prenup, so let's do our own prenup, and they throw away all the good things about state law. And also, the conversation always gets really hot because they learn, they think about prenups. The cant is that prenups will protect your money, so they start to protect their money, and then they think about all these terms that are like waiving spousal support.
Mhm.
I want you to waive spousal support. Okay, I'll do that. Things like that can be really dangerous. And
Mhm.
so that's why, these online services, they try to be informative, but then they give you a checklist of yes or no, and you're not being advised by somebody who's been married for a long time. So that's why when I recommend lawyers to review and to draft, I usually look for somebody who's over 55 or at least over 50, somebody who's been in a long marriage so they know what's involved, or somebody who's been in a long marriage that was divorced. But when you don't get any of that sort of guidance when you do the online prenup, even if you have attorneys review it, you're already locked into these decisions that you made without guidance. So I think
Mhm.
that's where I think mediation can come in really nicely, so that you can take all the different possibilities, talk
Mhm.
them over, kind of run them through the lifespan of your protected marriage, and
Mhm.
see how they work, and see whether they work. So
Yeah. Talking to
that's why.
Yeah, talking to somebody who has that experience allows for some of the nuances. I think that if you're somebody who feels like you need to have a prenup and you want to do it through uh, online services, that it's a boilerplate. It doesn't have the nuances in terms of your particular circumstances or potential future circumstances. That it's really wise to have a conversation, at least with somebody who has a lot of experience in that world. I would love to just hear some closing thoughts from you about what is it that creates a generous prenup as opposed to a dangerous prenup, because I think that's a really important distinction.
Well, I think the sharing of money, making sure that each party is secure when you look forward in years, secure, and security, in a 3 year marriage is different than a security in a 20 or a 25-year marriage,
Mm-hmm.
because the lack of security is going to make somebody feel bad, or if somebody has a lot of separate money, sometimes people almost have an affair with their money, and they just, you know spend a lot of time investing it, doing things with it, and leaving the other party out.
Yeah,
So having as much connection as you can with money coming in I think is really important, and
yeah,
that's what a generous prenup is.
love that.
It's being generous. I mean, part of I think, I look in my first book. I looked up whether generosity was important in marriage. And I put some of it in the book. Some of these, I think, ridiculous scientific university studies of it. But everybody who's married who knows when you're generous and nice to your spouse, caring, then if you're caring to each other, then that makes your marriage good or better.
Yeah. And there's like gratitude versus resentment. There's things that really foster great relationships and there's things that really erode them.
Yeah.
And how you approach your prenup has a huge impact on the whole
Yes.
marriage as a result. Yeah.
Yes. It does.
Yeah.
And prenups are needed sometimes.
Yes.
But I don't think Travis Hunter and his spouse need one. Maybe in their second marriage, if they get married again.
And they can always do a post-nup in the future if they need
They
to.
could.
That's a whole other
Absolutely.
conversation. But this
Yeah,
is their
they could.
young love. Let's let them have a great marriage for
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, there's enough money there to not be concerned.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your
Yeah.
time and
Yeah.
your wisdom. And
Thank you for your insights. I really enjoyed listening to your talk about this topic that I'm so interested in.
yeah, thank you. I know I've just immersed myself in it for sure. And I'm just thrilled that you are so prolific with your writing and wanting to support people in understanding the benefits and also the pitfalls of prenups
Mhm.
too. I think that that's really important. So thank you.
Thank you.